it's a negotiable treaty. That anytime we want, we can stop this treaty. And this was the wisdom of the Prophet ﷺ, that he never made a treaty forever. He had a treaty that has some clause that we have the right to rescind if we want to. And of course, by the way, later on, 15 years later, Umar ibn Khattab said, we don't need your money anymore, go to Rome. And so most of them left for the Roman Empire because Umar ibn Khattab wanted to make the Arabian Peninsula purely a Muslim region. And because of that, because of the wisdom of Umar, the entire region is a Muslim region. There are no indigenous people who are non-Muslim. Correct? Indigenous. Of course you have laborers and workers, but indigenous people of that entire Arabian Peninsula, all of them are Muslim because Umar ibn Khattab was the one who expelled. There were pockets. There were no pagans after the 9th year. We'll talk about that. But there were still pockets, if you like, especially in Central Arabia. After Umar ibn Khattab, there were small people of the Yahud here and there, but otherwise the entire peninsula was a Muslim peninsula. And the people of Najran said that, can you give us a judge to resolve our internal affairs, because we see you to be honest people. So this shows us that they were having internal disputes amongst themselves. And they wanted a neutral party to be some type of judge. So the Prophet ﷺ sent Abu Ubaidah Amir ibn al-Jarrah for a while to Najran to be their judge, that in case they have some dispute. And Al-Bayhaqi in his Dala'il al-Nubuwah, he narrates an interesting story that on the way back, and by the way, Ibn Ishaq and others, they mentioned that there were 60 in number. 24 of them were from their elite or noble. Of them were 3 who were some type of clergy or bishops, and of them was 1 who was some type of patriarch. So these are terms that their Christian church had, but they had some very senior officials in the delegation. So Al-Bayhaqi mentions on the way back, the patriarch or the senior most figure, one of his younger brothers said something derogatory about the Prophet ﷺ. And the patriarch said, do not curse him. So the brother said, why? The patriarch said that because he is the Prophet. Meaning this is the one that's been predicted. So the patriarch is now admitting he is the Prophet. So the brother says, why didn't you accept him then? I mean, I thought he's not, that's why we're following you. Right? So the patriarch says that, do you wish us to give up all of the honor and all of the wealth and all of the ties that the emperor has given us? Which emperor is the Roman emperor, right? That you expect us to now cut that off? I mean, how can we do that? And so when the younger brother heard this, he was so shocked that he actually defected from the tribe and he became a Muslim and came to Medina. So the point being that from Al-Bayhaqi's narration we learn that indeed the senior amongst them recognized, whereas the middle and most of them, they just followed the senior. And subhanAllah, this shows us the importance of the elite. That the fact of the matter, the bulk of mankind simply follows certain people. They look up to them. And that's why our Prophet ﷺ emphasized reaching out to those, the higher tabaqah, the highest group. That if they convert, and if you look at it, whenever the chieftain converted, whenever one of the noblemen converts, then it becomes easier for the rest to convert. And this is the reality, the sunnah of Allah amongst His creation. This is the reality. And therefore, people were genuinely following the patriarch. And when the patriarch confessed to his younger brother, this is his brother, when he confessed to him, so then the brother is so shocked that he actually embraces Islam. And some of these delegations were, so the delegations, as we said, were different. Some of them were Muslim, some of them were pagan and wanting to establish treaties, some of them were Christian, some of them were wondering, should we convert or not? And there's a beautiful hadith, and with this I conclude. This is the delegation led by Abdurrahman ibn Abi Aqil. Abdurrahman ibn Abi Aqil, one of the Sahaba. The only thing we know about him is this one hadith. Because again, if you're a part of the delegates, what does that mean? You only saw him once. You didn't participate in Badr or Uhud or whatnot. So there's a whole category of Sahaba that they are the ones who were the delegates. And the delegates are not to the level of the Badriyun or the people who participated in Hudaybiyah or whatnot. The delegates are these one-off, right? There are still Sahabi, and they are still respected, but you cannot compare them to the people who lived with the Prophet. So one of them is Abdurrahman ibn Aqil, that he says, I was one of those who went in a delegation of our tribe to the Prophet ﷺ. And when we asked permission to enter in upon him, there was no one in the world whom we despised more than the one that we were forced to go see. He's talking about his tribe. They're telling him to go, you have to do a negotiation. That when we went, the most despised person to us was the one that we had gone to see. But when we ended up leaving, there was no one in the world more beloved to us than the one we were departing from. Look at how the flip, right? That this is also understandable. That some people are coming thinking that they're going to be humiliated. That our tribe has now to give up its freedom. That we are now having to give up idolatry and accept a new faith. They're angry, they're hurt. And so they're treating the Prophet as a conqueror. That we don't want this person. But then when they see him and they interact with him, so they said, after these few days he becomes the most beloved person to us. And then he says, one of our youngsters said, O Messenger of Allah, why don't you ask your Lord to give you a kingdom like the kingdom of Sulaiman? Right? So become a king like the king of Sulaiman. So the Prophet ﷺ laughed and said, maybe your companion has been given a kingdom better than the kingdom of Sulaiman. Meaning what I have is better, don't worry. What I have is better. And the Prophet ﷺ said that Allah has never sent any prophet except that He has given him one request. And some of those prophets ask for something of this world. Some of them ask for punishment against their people. And as for me, Allah has given me a request that I have kept with myself between me and my Lord. It shall be my shafa'ah for my ummah on the day of judgment. So he said, I have the better kingdom than anybody else, because my entire people will enter Jannah, insha'Allah ta'ala. And before I finish off, just a few minutes, that I mentioned most of the interesting and important delegations. I also have to briefly mention, even though we don't do this for much of the seerah, but sometimes we have to mention bizarre and fabricated and weak narrations. We do this when these narrations are used to embarrass Muslims, or they're used by unorthodox groups of Islam. So some of the tertiary books of seerah, not the primary books, some of the more secondary and tertiary books of seerah, they mention some very bizarre stories. And I just mentioned them now. They are not authentic. I just mentioned them now so that sometimes you hear them, especially in the books of the extreme mystical Sufis. Sometimes you hear these groups, and one of them is actually very funny. The first of these, it is narrated in one of the tertiary books of seerah, not Ibn Ishaq, not any of the famous ones. I'm not going to mention the name, it's one of the more obscure ones. That the great-grandson of Iblis came to accept Islam in the delegation. The great-grandson of Iblis came to accept Islam. And he repented and whatnot. And this is, of course, not true. In the Mustadrak of Al-Hakim, which is a famous book of hadith, but it has lots of weak and daif and fabricated hadith. In the Mustadrak of Al-Hakim, it is mentioned that Ilyas alayhi salam, the Prophet Ilyas, came as a delegate. And a table from heaven came down and they had dinner together. And then when the dinner was finished, Ilyas went up into the heaven where he came from. Right? So, I mean, this is, wallah, you read it and you know something is bizarre, right? The fast food? No, this is up there. Ilyas goes there. And in the Al-Tabarani's Kitab Al-Awsat, and Tabarani's Awsat is a book that he intended to compile the most bizarre hadith, not the most authentic, the most obscure and strange hadith. And also Al-Kamil by Ibn Adi. And this is a book that is meant to narrate da'if hadith. So this is the ridiculous thing, that when you read sometimes a book and it says to you, narrated by Ibn Adi in his Kamil, you wonder what this person is doing when he's narrating a hadith from a book that is known to collect fabricated hadith. Like, the purpose of the author is to collect fabricated hadith. You understand my point, right? That his purpose is, I want you to be aware of these hadith. Then you come across somebody and he's quoting from it as if he's quoting from Bukhari or Muslim, like, I have told you where I got this from, this is my reference, right? So in this narration, which is also very long and obscure and bizarre, it is said that one day the stranger came to the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, and he made a beautiful dua, Allahumma a'inni ala ma yunjini mimma khawaftani, which is very Sufistic language, and it's something that is clear. There's a fabrication of the Sufis. And so the Prophet ﷺ smiled and then added a couplet or added a line. Why don't you add this to the dua as well? And there's a back and forth between the two. Finally it is discovered. Who do you think this person is? No. Khidr. Khidr came as well as the delegate. Okay. Khidr also came as a delegate. So all of this is all fabrication. And I just wanted to point out so that we are aware. No Ilyas, no Khidr, no Ibn Shaitan, nobody came. This is all from the fabrications of bizarre groups and not mentioned in the books of Seerah. So, to conclude all of the delegations, some of the benefits we gain from this, and then inshallah we're done with the delegations. What we see, especially in the 9th year of the Hijrah, how quickly Islam spread amongst the tribes of Arabia. We have delegations coming from the north, from the south, and from the west. East. Sorry, Najran is the east, right? Of course, west is the Arabian Peninsula, the Red Sea. There's nothing west, okay? South. Najran is south, excuse me. Najran is south. Southwest. Najran is southwest, isn't it? Yeah.
It's south in the way of Jizan.
But Yemen is direct south.
And it's the same, but Najran is just above.
Najran is just above that way, right? Isn't it? Yeah. You're right, you're right. You're right, the same road goes, exactly. So above Yemen would be Najran. So we have delegations coming from Najran, from Yemen. We have delegations that came from Oman. We mentioned that last time. We have delegations coming from north, from Najd, right? So all of these delegations coming, and وَرَأَيْتَ النَّاسَ يَدْخُلُونَ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ أَفْوَاجًا. So this was the year that without military campaigns, these are small tribes, each one of them is independent, they realize they cannot remain as they are. When everybody's embracing, they too either embrace or they enact a treaty to pay jizya, and therefore Islamic State is consolidated. And this is the first time in human history that the Arabian Peninsula was consolidated by one political power. Never before in the history of humanity had all of the Arab tribes been consolidated under one rule. And this shows us that the fruits of patience are always going to be sweet and always going to be, Allah fulfilled His promise to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It also shows us that even in the time of the Prophet, people were of different iman. That we have this naive assumption that everybody was like a walking Jibreel on earth. Everybody was like an Abu Bakr and Umar. No. In these narrations we see